Brightwood Pines, the town I had known my entire life, wasn't real. The first flash was painful, but it only lasted a few seconds. I was strapped to a hospital bed under a fierce yellow glow that seared my eyes, metal plates pressed to my temples, and looming figures hanging over me like ghosts. I could sense there were others, all of us in the exact same position, wriggling against the restraints, pinning us down. All of them looked like me. We had the exact same dark brown hair and green eyes, the exact same facial structure. I could hear their phantom cries, their screams as fear and pain erupted inside them, sending their thoughts into a vicious whirlwind. Something rubber was lodged between our teeth, and we were politely told to bite down on it. When we didn't, they forced us. The figure leaning close to us wore a mask. We all saw the same pair of eyes, creased with wrinkles, glinting with triumph. He prodded the metal plate attached to our temples, and we saw the slight wrinkle in the folds of his mask, which could only be a smile. His voice was a low murmur as he fitted the metallic plates. They were ice cold and made us flinch. "Tell me your name." We did, speaking through the rubber thing choking us. "Olivia, Allie, Charlotte." It took a while for my voice to join their symphony. 3 different versions of Elle. It did eventually, however faded it was. I think my brain was struggling to find the girl that had existed before Elle, who had a very different identity and her very own name. "Blank," I answered. When Elle was first created through Olivia, she was not alone in that room. There was a nameless boy screaming for death, but in a whole different tone. While we screamed and cried and struggled, this faceless boy's cries turned to laughter. There was one rule in that room, the room where every surface glistened with old and new red, and the floor had to be cleaned hourly to get rid of the bloodstains. The answer to the question was Elle. It was always Elle. If we spoke our real names with a kind of stubbornness which came with refusing to let go of our identities, along came agony like a snake, initially creeping up our spine, teasing, before exploding in every nerve ending, rattling our bodies. It almost felt like a presence had taken hold of us, twisting our limbs, eliciting our screams, snapping each bone, one by one, contorting us so we made a perfect arch, before slamming back down on the table we were strapped to. It felt like lightning, like we were being filled to the brim with lightning. In my dazed state, I pretended the lightning was stars, because being filled with stars sounded so much better, less painful. Olivia was the first to fail. She bled out all over the table. I only know this through her flickering vision, still attached to the implant. Allie's heart stopped before her death, an influx of nonsensical thoughts filling her mind. Charlotte was their first proper Elle and had my exact same memories. She had seen the men be shot dead when she was 8 years old, had noticed the abnormality in Mrs. Jensen's behavior, and had watched Kaz Isaacs split Jessa Pollock's skull open in 9th grade. Charlotte eventually cut into her wrists with a piece of glass and fell asleep in the bath. She was the one whose memory clung on, who wouldn't let go. I felt her shuddering breaths, saw the pooling scarlet dripping over marble, her trembling wrists struggling to cut deep enough. Through the implant, which was weakening as reality and memory came together in one vivid explosion inside my mind, I felt her panic and fear. Charlotte didn't want to die, but she also didn't want to continue living in a world that wasn't her own. Like me, she too had discovered the truth behind Brightwood and had ultimately decided that death was the only way out. I could still hear her lingering thoughts, could feel icy cold water enveloping her head as she sank deeper and deeper into the bathtub, as my world split open. A world where I was Elle, and yet someone else entirely. Brightwood was fake. She knew that, and now, so did I. What was real, however, were the clinically white corridors of the facility, centered around a town where it was legal to murder, and the shadows forcing my brain to submit to a world that was not mine. It was nothing but a fantasy, somewhere between my mind splitting open, revealing my true identity, and the cruel truth of the dystopian delusion I had been trapped in for what felt like an eternity. I was aware that my existence was splintering apart right before my eyes. I was awake in several different entangled memories where parallel versions of me existed. Suddenly, I was on my back, staring dazedly at the ceiling as alarm screeched in my skull, a dull red glow illuminating the stumbling figure pulling on my ankles. Kaz Isaacs, who was still hopped on whatever had been forced into his bloodstream. Two different versions of him existed in my memory. The boy whom I had known for the past 17 years of my life inside this illusion, and the shadow that had sat down in front of me in a reality where the aroma of coffee was familiar, where raindrops soaked my hair and slid down window panes. But it was so hard to hold on to that memory in particular. I could tell my implant was loose. I knew that one single flick of my tongue would dislodge where it was between my back teeth. Though as I was struggling to do just that, it was becoming harder to tell what was real and what wasn't. I could hear Kaz's sharp breaths as he struggled to pull my motionless body through a set of metal doors. But I could also hear the sounds of strangers around me inside the reality I was trying to divulge. The smell of coffee and disinfectant, a cocktail of both worlds, tickled the back of my nose and throat. But Brightwood was always stronger, always pushing to be at the forefront. When my feathering vision stabilized and the memory of the coffee shop against the backdrop of a rainy evening faded away, I was left dazedly counting ceiling tiles as I was dragged along, wondering why my body was no longer responsive.
I think I used to be a bad person.
At first, I thought I had imagined Kaz speaking, because I could still hear his voice in the memory. I could see the cruel gleam in this other version's eyes as he leaned forward, a teasing smirk twitching on his lips. This current Kaz, however, was a whole other person I couldn't bring myself to trust, despite his reluctance to hold on to his old self. His voice sounded like ocean waves once again, crashing into my mind and then drawing back with the rest of the sound in my ears. The boy's grip was slipping on my ankles, and I could tell by his labored breaths and hysterical giggles that his sanity wasn't far behind. But he kept speaking, forcing words through a slur that had seemingly taken his mind hostage from the drugs still in his system.
Was I a bad person?
He let go of my ankles and staggered forward, clawing at his chair. When the boy twisted around to face me, unbridled despair painted his expression. He dropped to his knees in front of me and leaned close, his shuddering breaths fluttering in my face.
Was I worse than the urge?
He whispered in a sing-song voice. When the alarm stopped, the intense red glow around him flashing out of existence, I glimpsed how sick he looked. He was sweating, pale. His cheeks were gaunt, and floppy hair was glued to his forehead. When Kaz looked at me directly, there was a fog in his eyes, something mechanical that I didn't understand flooding his pupils. His shadow was swaying. I could tell he was ready to collapse, ready to give up.
Worse than Joey Cunningham and those kids who murdered a bunch of freshmen in 7th grade. I think I was, really bad.
He jumped back up, grabbing my legs, a whole new determination taking over his eyes. Kaz started to laugh, loudly, like nothing else mattered.
I don't want to be a bad person. I don't want to be him.
He said it quietly. Then he tipped his head back and screamed at the ceiling before dragging me further, tightening his viper-like grip on my ankles. Another pull.
Al, I know you're tripping serious shit right now, but I would really appreciate some help.
He gasped out.
I don't know where we are, and the walls are moving. I keep remembering things that don't make sense in my head. My head feels like it's burning.
Kaz's fingernails sliced into my flesh. I felt his desperation to escape the red lights.
Come on, please. If I knew one punching you in the face would turn you into a sack of potatoes, I never would have done it.
Mr. Delacroix, stop. You are hurting yourself.
No, you did this to me.
He gritted back.
You turned my head into this, and I can't think straight. I keep seeing things.
He tore at his face.
I keep seeing things that don't make sense. Why, Elle?
His cry sent shivers down my spine.
I keep seeing her in every flash. I see her, and my brain is boiling. I feel like my head is going to explode.
With a vicious cocktail of drugs in his system, his voice turned sing-song.
I think I'm going crazy.
Kaz laughed, his eyes suddenly far too bright. Even through my flickering eyes, the contrast of his blood in the marble corridor was horrifying. I could see every river of red sliding between cracks in the tiles, pooling scarlet dripping down his chin and staining the blue gown hanging off of him.
Why is it all you?
His lips split into a grin, and for a fraction of a second, his old self, the one I had seen in my memory, was seeping through. The boy tipped his head back and screamed,
Why her? Fucking tell me!
Let me handle this. A familiar voice floated behind us. I wasn't sure where it was coming from, though I did have a vague guess that we were surrounded. When Kaz gave up and dropped my ankles, I sensed footsteps growing closer to us. I expected Kaz to try and run, but instead, he broke down, pulling his knees to his chest.
Stop calling me that,
he said in a sharp cry.
Just stop.
Like Annalise Duval, his mind seemed to have snapped, splintering into pieces. The boy resembled her from earlier on, rocking back and forth and whispering to himself, his hands in his hair, clawing out clumps.
Stop calling me that,
Kaz whispered.
Stop calling me that. Stop calling me that. Stop fucking calling me that.
When a pair of arms wrapped around his waist and attempted to pull him to his feet, he lashed out like an animal, his teeth bared.
Get your fucking hands off me!
The stranger's embrace followed him when he tried to back away, clamping down on his shoulders. I only had to see the masked face and those cruel, piercing eyes to know it was the same man who had taken away my real name. No, we are rectifying this now, the man said, struggling to hold the boy down. I watched in sharp flashes as Kaz slammed into the ground back first. I remember trying to move, to help him, except I couldn't. I was locked inside my own body. The masked man knelt in front of Kaz like a father, and I really believed he was the boy's father until he forced his head down, uncaring when the back of Kaz's skull hit the marble with a sickening crack, enough to disorient him. Mr. Delacroix,
No,
Kaz slurred.
no, 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 no.
You are sick. The man spoke with enough emphasis to send globules of saliva towards the boy's face. You are broken, poisoned. Nothing you do will change my mind, young man. I must admit, the last thing I expected you to do was forcing a broken implant back inside your mouth. Now that was the final straw. He choked out a laugh. What a childish thing to do. I mean, I always knew you were childish, but never to this degree. To intentionally want to be a regressed version of yourself? When Kaz stared at him through flickering eyes, part of me understood what the man meant. It must have hurt to see a completely different person in place of who he thought he created. Do you really want to get rid of all our hard work? Everything you did to become a vital part of Darkroom. Your fans. The promise you made to us. Really, Mr. Delacroix, are you going to throw it all down the drain? We are no longer working with the influencer we created. Instead, you have become a spineless and pathetic child who has mentally regressed due to a faulty implant. When Kaz weakly attempted to fight back against both the man's grasp and the odd name forced upon him, his wrists were pinned down. Listen to me, the man said. That is your name. You do not go by any other name, per what you learned inside the Red Room. Do you understand me? You belong with us, son. You are part of the reason why we exist, why we took a chance on this project. And it's time you remember that. Brightwood makes the world a better place. It extinguishes those urges people have by allowing them to consume it 24 hours a day. You are part of that. Kaz let out an animalistic shriek when the man forced 2 fingers inside his mouth and pried it open. What did I tell you? I gave you one simple instruction, and that was not to touch the implant. The motion of his hand, as well as Kaz's eyes rolling back and his body going still, told me everything I needed to know. When my classmate's head hit the ground, his eyes flickering shut, I knew the implant was gone. For good this time. The man held it pinched between his fingers before snapping it in 2. He dropped it on the ground with a frustrated hiss and got to his feet. I signed a contract promising that I would raise and protect Darkroom's own, and I am held to that. This time he spoke to the sudden influx of shadows surrounding us, as one in particular gathered Kaz into his arms. I felt a sudden presence attempting to lift me to my feet. Mr. Delacroix has been severely poisoned by the implant. What I thought would be fixed by a new tooth had clearly blown up in our faces. Since the regression has reached the boy's mind and is no longer just part of the implant, I want him in the Red Room. Now. The young man must undergo Protocol 415 immediately. If we don't, the boy will die. We need a stage 3 wipe, a full decontamination. Kaz was dying, bleeding out when they carried him away, his nose and mouth and ears hemorrhaging, his body convulsing. I was frowning at the amount of contrasting red and white on the floor when I was pulled unceremoniously to my feet, jarring the world around me. That was the exact movement I needed. I remembered being a little kid inside this fake world of Brightwood. I had a loose tooth at the front of my mouth, and with the promise of the tooth fairy coming to give me a whole $1 for my tooth, I had spent the better half of the day prodding in my mouth. I wobbled it around until I was convinced it was stuck. despite being able to lodge and dislodge it out of place with the roof of my tongue. Halfway through SpongeBob SquarePants, however, I jumped up to get a glass of water from the kitchen. It was that sudden jolting movement that finally dethroned the crown from where it had stubbornly sat for days. In a similar fashion, the guard yanking me to my feet was enough to send shockwaves through my body. I felt the twitching, moving tooth like it was alive. Before I could fully register it to spit it out, though, I was back inside my contorted mind once again. With a sudden sharp, slicing agony rattling both my mouth and my brain, I was exactly where I wanted to be. Starbucks. There was no Brightwood. No sterile white corridors smeared with my classmates' blood. There was just the rain and my own twisting gut. The memory was in full clarity now that the implant was gone. I was sitting against the backdrop of a rainy spring evening with Kaz Isaacs in front of me, leaning on his fist with a quizzical yet sadistic smile on his lips. I remember wondering what exactly his expression was, because I had never seen one like that before. It took a while of pondering to realize what I was seeing. Insanity. I had never seen true insanity until I met him, a haunting, inhuman glitter. His entire body was practically vibrating with excitement, like my fear was causing him exhilaration. His knee knocked against mine under the table. Cocking his head like a puppy dog, the boy settled me with a smile, feigning curiosity when I took a hesitant sip from my coffee. "Well?" Kaz's smile widened at my expression. "Are you done playing your game?" A girl who looked way too young to be working at Starbucks plonked a chocolate milkshake in front of him, and he leaned forward and took a sip from the straw before flashing the girl a grin. "Thanks." He turned his attention back to me, his eyes glittering as he latched his lips to the straw. He took 3 large gulps before tipping his head back, exhaling. "How about a hello first? You know, formal speech. Hello, how are you doing?" "Oh, I'm great. How about you?" His smile quirked into a grin. "Oh, just killing people for cash. You know, the works. In fact, I'm doing more than that. I'm uploading it to the fucking internet." Before I could stop myself, I reacted in a frenzy, reaching across the table and slamming my hand over his mouth. But to my horror, he just muffled laugh into my palm. "Do you want me to go on?" He waggled his eyebrows, and I could sense his sickening smile growing. "There's a lot of people in here who would love to know about your little antics several days ago." His words were muffled, but it would only take a stranger straining their ears to get the gist of what he was saying. Kaz knew this, and he was playing to my weakness, my obsession with keeping this on the down low. He cocked his head, his eyes piercing mine. I found myself lost in them. 2 holes of pooling oblivion, no humanity. Or are you going to have common courtesy, When I removed my hand, he sat back and took another sip of shake. "Try again." His smile was teasing, but his tone was just like that of the texts. Playful yet terrifying. When I could only stare at him blankly, he laughed. "Oh my God, are you stupid? Hello, it's nice to meet you. I'm Felix. What a great night we're having," the boy mocked. "Is it that hard to understand? Jeez. I find it hard to believe you could actually make a video." "My name is blank," I said. "Why are you here?" He arched a brow, chewing on his straw. "Why do you think I'm here?" I couldn't resist my own laugh.
I'm sorry. How old are you? 15.
He rolled his eyes.
I'm literally 1 year younger than you. And it's not like we're different.
Felix leaned forward.
But I want you to ask me that question again. Think about it, blank. Why am I here? After all my texts you ignored, my calls, even my Insta request. He pouted. Honestly, you would think after all I've offered, you would at least return my fucking calls.
He slammed his milkshake down, his smile unwavering.
You think you can upload whenever you want, and you won't get noticed by us?
It was for my older sister.
It was for my sister,
Felix mocked with a giggle. The kid was 15 years old, but the way he was acting, it was like he hadn't mentally aged past 10. Lifting his milkshake, he saluted me.
Great excuse. Still murder.
Something in his eyes twinkled.
Your little snuff film currently stands at almost 4 million views, 300,000 likes, and 70,000 shares. Which, he whistled. Damn, I'd call you Darkroom's biggest thing right now, but, I mean, I'm also in the room.
He shrugged, draining the shake.
You're maybe a close third or fourth, if you knock Lil Sim out of the top spot. But I will say you're getting there. In fact, if you check your subs, your macabre masterpiece is just about to knock me down. I watched the boy's odd, twitchy movements as he wrapped his fingers around the milkshake and squeezed, popping the lid off. Which, unfortunately, makes us, rivals. His lips split into a grin. And normally, I would go after said rival and rip their guts out on camera. But the big wigs have decided to use me to get to their cash grab. He kicked me under the table. That, annoyingly, is you. I want nothing to do with you, I whispered. His smile disappeared as he struggled with a cup, avoiding eye contact. You also uploaded a video of yourself mutilating a guy to the internet, which I gotta say is pretty badass.
Something ice cold slithered down my spine, and I felt myself recoil in my seat. I swore I would never think about that video after deleting the app and taking all the cash from the amount of views it got. It was with bitter irony that the money was going towards my sister's college fund.
What are you saying?
I demanded. He shrugged and his gaze found mine once again.
I'm saying...
He dragged out the word like I was a preschooler.
Why don't we help each other? I want my rep back, after a tiny mistake which wasn't even my fault.
He rolled his eyes.
How was I supposed to know vomiting wasn't allowed to be shown? I can rip out my pop's guts and that's fine, but spewing? That's not allowed? What is this, fucking Twitch? Jeez. You'd think they would treat their top influencers with some kind of respect, right? I mean, I'm literally at the top. I practically own them. And they think they can suspend me for accidentally barfing?
This kid was insane, I thought dizzily. I didn't speak and his smile pricked back into existence.
Anyway, Darkroom wants to sign you as a full-timer. And before you say, oh no, I did it for my sister, I needed money for my family, he mocked my voice again. That, my friend, is bullshit. If you had the guts, pun intended,
to do that and upload it to Darkroom, then you have what they call potential. Not as much as Red Room OG, but you're getting there. He smirked. Also, your probs have serious problems. But hey, don't we all? You gotta be fucked in the head to get our attention. And damn, you certainly did that. Who are you? Was all I could say. I swallowed hard. You're 15 years old. Felix held my gaze. I'm one of their best, he said. Darkroom made me. Well, a bunch of us. He winked. From scratch. What do you want? I gritted out. He chuckled. And geez, enough with the who, what, when, where, and how. We're friends, right? You've been blackmailing me. Well, yeah, because you're almost #1 on Darkroom right now. As much as it pains me to say that, and trust me, it does. Why are you even part of this? I demanded. You're a high school sophomore. The boy tilted his head. I've never been to school, he said. All I've ever known is killing my brother and my pops. He chuckled. You want to know what I did? He leaned in close to me, lips almost latching onto my ear. When I tried to shove him back, he grasped onto my hair and tugged it hard. I really wanted to know how the brain worked. Felix murmured, his breath ice cold. So I split my dad's head open and had a peek. When my brother started screaming, I killed him too. I carved up my big brother like a Thanksgiving turkey and went viral on Darkroom. His fingers tightened in my hair, taking hold of my scalp. So why don't you start asking serious questions? When he let me go, I tried to stand up. Felix slammed his hands down on the table. Sit down. I haven't finished with you yet. I flinched when he leaned on his fist, eyeing me quizzically. Well? I swallowed the sickly paste creeping up my throat. What do they want me to do? Felix's expression lit up. He pulled out his phone, tapping the screen with his index. Easy. You do 2 kills a week. You can decide how you kill them. Darkroom will pay you $60K per kill. And depending on how good your videos are received, they could give you a bonus. Full protection from the police, too. He cleared his throat. Now what you can't do is put out content anywhere else. YouTube, Twitch, TikTok. Trust me, there are hidden communities that allow this kind of content to get past filters. The world is fucked, and people want to see bodies. But hey, you'll get paid and accumulate a fan base, and you'll also end up on the front page. His lips twitched into a smirk when I leaned back. There are 3 categories on Darkroom. We have the usual users who post normal shit, you know? Like mutilation and kidnapping, that kind of vanilla crap. And there are the ones like you. Idiots with zero self-awareness who get a taste for killing and upload their filthy fixes. If they get an onslaught of likes and catch Darkroom's eye, they're invited to join. Finally, he pointed to himself. And then there are the ones they make, which are the OGs. So, what's it gonna be? His eyes lit up. Are you in? Blank? You post a video every day of either mutilation, torture, murder, whatever, and bam, instant cash. Get to the top, and you'll start getting a following. His smile was growing progressively more maniacal. Then you'll be able to stream it live. And streaming live? That's a whole different party once you become one of us. Streaming live means you've made it. He winked. If you know what I mean. No. The word was sputtering from my mouth before I could help it. I'm not doing that. Felix's smile wavered. He reminded me of a kid who wasn't getting what he wanted. Well, the alternative is a visit to the dentist. What? He opened his mouth wide. I'm actually scheduled for tomorrow. I'm set for a lead influencer role in their ongoing project. If I manage to sign you on, I get $60,000 per appearance. My account bumped to the top in my rep bag. He tilted his head. I like you, blank. I mean, I hate you because we're rivals, but I think you could be something special. Sure, you're not like the Red Room OGs who sit at the top no matter what, but you brutally mutilated the man who hurt your sister and uploaded it to the internet. He hummed, drinking me in. Clearly, you have a thirst. Or should I say urge? His smile widened. To spill blood. That's why you killed that man with no mercy and then chopped off his dick. I'm leaving, I managed to say, jumping to unsteady feet. Darkroom recently lost their leading girl, you know, Felix said loudly. She killed herself on camera. Slit her wrists in a bathtub. Sure, it was great content for viewers, but now they're looking for a replacement. He tapped his fingers in a rhythm on the table. I wonder who that could be. I don't know how I managed to stand up. Leave me alone. I managed to spit at him. Spread the video. I don't care. If you come near me again, I'll call the cops. I started to walk away, but the boy's hand whipped out to wrap around my wrist. He jumped to his feet, no longer smiley and playful. His eyes glittered with that unbridled insanity I didn't want to believe existed. But Felix mocked with a pout, and he let me go, spreading out his arms. I should have ran. Every part of me was screaming at me to get away. But suddenly, I was all too aware of the teenage girls in front of me, giggling. The businessmen on their laptops had stopped typing, and the more I noticed it, the more I realized it was everywhere. A silence spreading across the store, reaching the baristas behind the counter. I felt every eye on me, and when I forced myself to meet their gazes, their eyes were as maniacal as Felix's. Their smiles were too wide. No, I thought dizzily. Their eyes weren't glued to me. They were all on him. What would everyone think? Felix raised his voice before bouncing in front of me with a wide grin. Your parents' sweet baby girl is a murderer. How would they be able to cope? I caught movements around me, and each person, whether they were a man or a woman or a teenager, was slowly lifting their phone to point at me. Felix noticed them, his grin growing wider. He knew he had an audience. What about your dad and brother? He mocked a sob. Your bullied sister. The boy shocked me by diving onto the table, and people started to murmur and laugh amongst themselves. He twisted around, still grinning. Come on, blank. Surely you don't want the alternative, right? I started to back away, but the woman who was suddenly standing behind me shoved me forward. Or maybe, Felix continued, pausing for effect. He was speaking to the crowd this time, the people pointing their phones at me. Maybe you do want the alternative. He stepped towards me, and so did they, in an almost zombie-like march, suffocating me. Their eyes were greedy, smiles cruel. What do you say, guys? Do you want blank to be your new L? They didn't reply for a moment, and his smile grew, like he knew he had them under his control.
I fucking said.
Felix cupped his mouth and kicked a chair over.
Do you want Plank to be your new L?
Yes, they said in a low drone, their voices tangling together. What's going on? My legs felt ready to give way. Who are these people? Felix shrugged, jumping back down.
Duh. They want to meet L.
He leaned close, his hands behind his back. I backed away, my breath stuck in my throat. Felix followed, holding up his phone. Up close was my own face staring at him. When he blinked, so did the stream. His grin was wild, and something mechanical glittered in his left eye.
Smile. You're live.
The memory blurred for a moment, and I was only aware of pushing through people with the same smile, the same insanity sparkling in their eyes. I couldn't breathe. The glowing light of the coffee shop faded away as I threw myself into the night. Pouring rain soaking me, a downpour which was both an inconvenience and yet also a relief. I choked on my own sobbing breaths as I splashed through puddles, trying to pull my phone from my pocket, but my trembling hands kept failing, slipping and sliding on my sodden jeans. I could sense he was following me, slowly. Felix knew moving slower would only drive me further into my own insanity. I could hear him intentionally kicking his way through puddle after puddle. I thought I'd lost him after leaping over a fence and cutting through a park. But in the haunting dark, unable to see a thing in front of me, his laugh bled into the silence of the night, and I found myself screaming into my hands, my legs starting to give way. I could see them, glitters of phone flashlights illuminating the dark. Like him, his followers surrounded me.
I don't understand when they run.
Felix wasn't bothering to shout. I sensed him getting closer and closer, his steps quickening.
It just makes it more fun. And might I say, chat, I am having a great time.
Felix laughed.
Are you guys having fun? Because we're not finished yet. Do you want to see me get my hands dirty?
Coming to an abrupt halt, I scanned the getaway options in front of me. An alleyway with a dead end but a wall I could climb over, and an electric fence. I was halfway down the alleyway when his footsteps stopped. I twisted around to face him, rain plastering my hair to my face. Felix was more shadow than human, a silhouette standing in the pitch dark. But even when oblivion had swallowed him up, I could sense his grin.
What's your brother's name again?
His words were like razors slicing through me.
Nicholas? The passcode to his apartment is, isn't it 09-1206? Your B-day?
Nick. I promised him I would meet him back at his place after I met with a stranger blackmailing me. When I started to run again, so did he. After giving me a head start, he howled like a wild animal, like he was hunting me down.
Come on, Al.
His footsteps pounded on concrete.
Why are you running away from us?
When I stepped into my brother's apartment 15 minutes later, I found myself face to face with one of the most beautiful girls I had ever seen, and a blade inches from my throat. Standing in the dull glow of Nick's place, the girl resembled an angel. Dark, curly hair pulled into pigtails, a white dress hanging off of an hourglass figure. Behind her was my family, my mom, dad, brother, and sister. All of them had faces, except my sister. I saw my mother's frightened and wild eyes, my father's grimace and my brother's attempt to appear calm. But not her. My sister was nothing but a confusing blur of gold that bathed them all in harsh light. The girl had tied their hands behind their backs with Christmas lights. Her eyes glittered like Felix's, a cutting grin on her lips. "There you are." She retracted the knife and stumbled back, giggling. Holy crap, I was about to send out a rescue party. When I risked a step forward, she traced the curve of my throat with the knife. "You have a super cute family." "Sim, for fuck's sake, didn't I say wait?" When the door rattled and a soaking Felix stuck his head through, my body went into fight or flight. I twisted around, attempting to shut him out. The girl's arms wrapped around me, her warm breath dancing in my ear. She was so beautiful, graceful like an angel, and yet her fingernails stabbed into my flesh, her words cutting into me. "Don't fucking do that." She yanked me back forcefully. "That's not part of the game." Turning her attention to Felix, who sidled through the door, looking like a drowned rat, she laughed. "Sorry, I got a little ahead of myself." "A little?" He scowled, grabbing a towel from my brother's couch and wiping his face. "Didn't we agree to share content?" "We did," Sim pouted. "But I wanted to tie them up." She gestured to him before dancing over to my brother and letting out an exaggerated sigh. Felix shoved me to my knees. When I cried out, he slammed his hand over my mouth. "Now this is a snuff film, my dude. You thought you were at the top? Darkroom spawns the sickest of the sick. Subhuman trash who deserve to rot in the ground. The true unraveling of the human psyche." He laughed. "And that's us." He stroked his hands across my cheek. "You shouldn't have challenged us. Darkroom wants you, but that's their game. Sure, you're going to become their new L, but I want to remind you to know your fucking place." Felix tugged my ponytail at the exact same time Sim pressed her knife to my mother's throat, humming a nursery rhyme. "This little piggy went to the market," she sang before slicing my mother's throat open. My vision blurred and I was aware I was screaming, but no sound was coming out. When I tried to throw myself forward, Felix yanked me back with a loud laugh. "This little piggy stayed at home." Sim stabbed the blade into my father's chest, and he slumped forward. The girl made a face, pulling out the blade. My dad's blood spattering her face. She flashed me a smile before moving on to my brother. "This little piggy had roast beef." The blade this time split open his skull, then went to his throat. "And this little piggy had none." Reality blurred as I watched red pool on my brother's rug, my family's blood coming together. "And this little piggy..." The girl had reached my sister, wrenching her head back by her ponytail and teasing the teeth of the knife across her throat. The girl's smile pricked before she let my sister go. Her eyes flicked to me. "She's all yours, Svi. There's your fucking content." Sim knelt in front of my sister and covered her eyes playfully, before suddenly revealing them. "Peekaboo!" The glowing blur that was my sister didn't scream or cry, just stared ahead. I couldn't see her face, and yet I knew her eyes were unseeing, rejecting reality. "Do you want to guess how many people are watching right now?" Felix murmured. I didn't reply, choking through the violent sobs racking my chest. 1 million, he said. 1 million sick bastards watching us carve your family into pieces. And I'm not even finished. So here's what I'm going to do. Instead of killing your sister right here, right now, I'm going to take my time. Felix pressed his lips to my cheek in a kiss. I'm going to take chunks of her each day, body and mind, so that when I do the big reveal, you won't even recognize her. I'll make her last, don't worry. And hey, he chuckled, maybe just to see your despair, I'll ask the bigwigs if she can be put into the project. He let me go with a hysterical laugh. Imagine that, your own sister. When I'm finished with her, she'll be begging to die. I screamed, but it choked up in my throat. Keep screaming. That's what they love. When I was in Red Room, oh man, they sucked up my screams like it was their drug. These bastards feed off of our pain. Shh. Sim hissed in a giggle. We're not supposed to... Oh, relax. It's not like Red Room's a secret. It's how we were made after all. I felt his fingers pushing through my lips, choking me. See? You do have cavities. Now, Blank, I'd like you to meet someone. She's been waiting for you. His voice was sing-song, and I was forced to breathe in an aroma which made my head spin, like inhaling bleach. Say hello, Elle. My vision blurred, and I was back inside Clinical White, strapped down, metallic plates glued to my temples once more. I saw Kaz looming over me, Felix, the boy who I had known my whole life, or at least the one inside Brightwood, was nothing but a lie, forced inside a psychopath. He was still draped in his bloody gown, but he had color in his cheeks, which meant that the implant was gone. I blinked through feathering visions as bolts ran through me. I could see the slight glint of the camera encircling his iris. The boy bent down, ice-cold breath tickling my neck, and in a sing-song voice, as if he had been prodding inside my brain and seeing my memory, he finished the nursery rhyme. A familiar giggle came from behind him. I saw an older-looking Sim, her shorter curls tied into pigtails. A group of boys and girls joined her, surrounding me. They must have been what Felix was talking about. Darkroom OGs. Standing next to Kaz, her arm looped through his as her body racked in laughter, was Annalise. Her pale skin glistened with sweat, hollow eyes turning her into a puppet on strings. Felix's words echoed in my mind. I'm going to take her apart mentally too. First her mind, then I'll start cutting pieces off of her. Not enough to kill her, no, because one day I want to remind you of your sister, and I want you to look at her and have that painful thought, one that will rip you apart from the inside. I have a sister? He mocked my voice. Do I really have a fucking sister? Wow, I had no idea. Something wet hit my forehead, Kaz's blood spotting my cheeks, as a stray thought began to blossom in my mind. That perhaps, maybe, no. More wetness, until my lips were tainted with his blood. It kept going, dribbling from his nose and grinning mouth. He pressed his fingers to my cheeks, cocking his head, a hollowness spreading in his eyes. His smile split open his mouth, and the vision of my parents' brutal murder played like a stock record in my mind, relentless. And this little piggy? Kaz continued to sing, as Annalise's giggles grew louder in my ears. and the tips of his fingers tiptoed across my cheek, smearing deep, dark red.
Went all the way